From our free daily newsletter, the latest from podnews.net with Spots Now. Is Netflix's podcast strategy paying off? Writing in Puck, Matthew Baloney suggests that multiple Netflix company sources have told him that podcast engagement numbers on the whole are low on the platform. He adds that no video podcast has charted on Nielsen's weekly top 10. If you want our opinion, you'll find it in the show notes or in our newsletter at podnews.net. A councillor in St John's in Canada has been suspended after quoting from comments given by a guest of Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO and presenting those claims as medical fact. The claims were made by Erica Commissar, an author and licensed clinical social worker. She isn't a psychologist, and a registered psychologist interviewed by CBC News has suggested that the claims made by Commissar were inaccurate. Meanwhile, Ireland's RTE has written a piece on the rise of Stephen Bartlett's controversial show. Semaphore reports that The Atlantic is doubling the size of its video team. Podcasts at the magazine have grown by 50% in downloads over the last year and more than doubled revenue. How can you tell when a microphone company is supportive of podcasters? Well, here's a prime example: when they don't offer exclusive deals with only one online retailer. Shure is offering money off its range of microphones and earphones wherever you get your microphones, whether that's Amazon or other authorised dealers across North America. Some of the savings, $66 off the SM7B, for example, or $48 off the updated version of this, the MV Plus. Does podcast advertising work for Domino's Pizza? Libsyn has released a case study detailing how they helped the chain improve awareness of the company's specialty pizzas, drove higher purchase intent by up to 15 points, and strengthened brand perception by 20 points. Libsyn's report doesn't mention Domino's by name, but we used a top-secret piece of internet technology called a search engine to unmask them. The Apple Podcast logo is about to change again. The newest version of iOS and macOS has a subtly different icon, with the differences visible on a webpage that we link to today. Most visible is the bright purple logo around the listener's head. Logos in developer builds may change before release, though. The 20-year-old Mormon Stories podcast has been the subject of a trademark and copyright suit brought by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The church claims it's an issue of confusion and says it isn't trying to silence its critics. The podcaster says he's worked with the church and is surprised and perplexed at the legal action. Talking about Mormon, one of the hosts of Boardroom Talks is Speedy Mormon, which isn't anything to do with any church, but Amazon's Wondery has signed a deal with that podcast's owner, the sports brand Boardroom. They run podcast's Cover Story as well as Boardroom Talks. And if you're using MySQL or Postgres as your podcast database, then Apple Podcasts has just ticked over ID number 21 trillion, which is the highest int you can score. You'll be wanting a big int. From now on, Apple Podcasts seemingly moved up to very, very large ID numbers over the last 48 hours. There's a surprise. In People News, Jordan Peterson can't really return to podcasting or public lecturing, he said, but he will be posting archive material. He's been unwell for much of the year. And in podcast news, Matt Cundall's Sound Off podcast today interviews Dan Meisner from Bumper about podcast stats and the Bumper score. Dan talks about the missing data from YouTube and whether stats should be public by default. We're not trying to create standards, Meisner says. People can agree to buy advertising with no industry body having to write a white paper in order to make that happen. AI transcription is fine if the show's in English, but how about Hausa or Pidgin or Yoruba or all three? Tony Doe's Into the Podverse talks with the inventor of a new solution for podcasters in Africa, one that understands code switching. It's the show's 50th episode. And this podcast is sponsored by Spots Now. You can get Spots Now's Claude and ChatGPT connector free for a month. Ask your AI anything about podcast advertising in plain language right inside Claude or ChatGPT. Designed from the ground up for podcast advertising workflows and strategic sales and buying questions to give you a competitive advantage. You can connect free in 60 seconds at spotsnow.io/intelligence, or find the link in our show notes. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe for free, we're at podnews.net.